our Fireside Chat on DNA with our very own Sara Allen. She is our in-house DNA expert, and we are very, very pleased that she's willing and able to do this conversation with you. So please feel free to put a question in the Q&A for discussion. And then if you want to discuss amongst yourselves, put it in the chat. We're going to try very hard to just keep Sara and I in the Q&A, and then other staff members will be in the chat trying to help with any technical questions or to remind you to throw things in the Q&A if you have a question. So Sara, thank you. Do you want to get started on the questions? I see we have 7. Things are popping in here.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have worried about whether anyone would post a question.
Oh no, I don't think that's ever a problem here.
I know. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see you. So tonight we're going to chat about DNA, and Allison and I will try to do our best to kind of off the cuff answer some of your questions. Some of them may be more complicated, maybe more than we can do during this session. And so we'll be putting our email address into the chat at different points so that you could send me specifically an email asking me, more specifics about your particular question, especially if I say, so-and-so, I can't answer a question tonight. Please email me. So, all righty. So let's go to the first question that we have in the question and answer. And it's from a person named Mun, and they say, I uploaded DNA to living DNA. So they tested it at autosomal DNA at one company, and then they uploaded it to living DNA, which is another company that accepts uploads. It's also autosomal. The living DNA is based in the UK, and they are supposed to be developing ways to kind of pinpoint where in the UK your family was from. So when you get your ethnicity estimate back from them, it might say that you're from Cambridgeshire or Oxfordshire instead of just saying England. So Mun says, most of my family on both sides came to the US in the early 1600s. I have one great grandmother that came in about 1500. I would love to know what regions of England the family came from, but wonder if I need to have recent relatives there to get the region designations. I have some matches there. They are very low, only a few in the 400s or 40 Centimorgans range. Yes, Mun, I think you're right in saying that if you had more recent ancestors that were from England, you would have a better result with those regions. Mine was kind of abysmal. I don't know if they gave me a region or not. I can't quite recall. And not very many people have uploaded. And so that's why you have fewer matches, I think. It's interesting. Okay, Allison's going to show us her living DNA, I believe. Is that true, Allison?
Yeah, so this is mine.
Okay.
They do have the breakdowns. But the interesting thing is I don't have recent immigrants from Great Britain. So this is just fascinating to me.
Do you know how accurate it is? Like, have you checked to see if you have somebody from Cumbria or Lancashire in your tree?
I haven't found them yet.
Okay.
I have early colonial immigrants. Mm-hmm. And that is typically where my Great Britain ancestry comes from. So some of that has been really hard to trace. We all have brick walls, guys. So I don't know how accurate this is. This is getting better up here. I will say that. Although I have an ancestor that I know for a fact came from France. So.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that kind of interesting. And then relatives.
Mm-hmm. So you have really low kind of level matches too, in the 40 Centimorgans and less. Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of them from the US, which is interesting. You've got one from the UK, it looks like, maybe down there. Yep. Interesting.
Although I have to
So
say that my mother's in here and it says UK.
she's from the UK. Yeah. Who knows? I'm not that familiar with living DNA, quite frankly, but it's really interesting. Yeah. My English relatives are also from colonial times. So I don't really have anybody that was more recently coming from that area. So, and I haven't really double checked against what I got as far as living DNA went, whether I have people from that area or not. But if you do know where your colonial ancestors, well, it sounds like you don't, but it sounds like Mun didn't know where hers were from. So she's hoping living DNA will help her. I'm not sure if it's at that point yet.
I mean, I think it's getting there. It's better than it was. The first time I got my test results, it's something like, I think I had 78% Great Britain, and then it had like some really high numbers in places I'd never heard of before. So I think they're getting better. They're honing in on their DNA and how they're working with it. So I think it's
all the ethnicity estimates are getting better as they hone in better. And living DNA is a more recent company. Like they've only been around for a few years, and so they're going to be maybe a little bit behind some of the other companies as far as refining things. So yeah,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's fascinating, and I think it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's like any other ethnicity estimate. You're kind of going to take it with a grain of salt, but on the other hand, it's super intriguing sometimes what comes up. Okay, well, let's move on to Kenneth here. So Kenneth says, my maternal grandmother never had a father identified. There is a person I think was her dad on my through lines. How accurate is that? Okay, well, let's see, Kenneth. I'm not knowing more about your question. I can only answer it in kind of generalities. The through lines is going to be based on your DNA matches and their trees. So they've got trees, and you know that people can put incorrect information in a tree. We see it all the time. we see strange trees with all sorts of crazy things. There's a tree on Ancestry that says my mom died in 2012 or something like that, and she was very much alive in 2012. But if you have, on the other hand, if you're saying that you have multiple matches to this guy that's identified on your through lines, and you have no other reason to think that you might be related to this guy in any other way, then you may be onto something. It may be showing you some clue that you need to follow up on. I'd be happy to look at it if you wanted to send us an email, and I can kind of give you a better sense of what you're seeing and whether it's significant or not. But your through lines should be, linking you to your 4 great grandparents or great grandparents or whatever. And so you should have matches to the other sides of the family, your maternal grandmother's mother's family, and your maternal grandfather's family, and your paternal grandparents' family. So if these through line people are not related to any of those families, then, it seems like you might be onto something. So, but you have to treat through lines as a clue, and then you need to verify it through other means, because it's not always going to be like correct, because people's trees can be wrong, or the degree of relationship can be wrong. Through lines is going to may tell you that somebody is your grandfather, but he could be your great grandfather, or, it could be off by a generation or two. Let's see, did Kenneth write back at all? Let me look here down at the bottom. Oh yeah. He says my great grandmother later married him. Okay. All right. So Kenneth, I guess you're saying then that you have matches to this guy, and your grandmother was born before their marriage is basically what you're saying. And so you're thinking, wonder if he was the father or not. So yes, it's totally possible. Yes. Especially if you have matches to this guy's family that you shouldn't have otherwise. Jennifer has a question. Are certain sites better than others for finding cousins from Germany, Bohemia, and or Ireland. Well, if you're talking about autosomal, MyHeritage has a lot of people that are in their database who live in Europe. So MyHeritage has been kind of targeting European customers. So for instance, I have an Eastern European side of my family, and I have a lot of relatives that are still in Eastern Europe. And at MyHeritage, I have a couple of people that have my tree up. Like they have there's trees up on MyHeritage for my Eastern European side of the family from people who are living in Eastern Europe right now. So they've joined MyHeritage and they live in Slovenia. So I would say try MyHeritage if you haven't already. It is, you can upload to MyHeritage if you've tested at one of the other companies. For Ireland, I would say probably Ancestry is your better, is probably where most people have tested. Now, Germans in Germany have not been able to do DNA testing. I believe it was against the law. It may still be against the law. And so they have to kind of do some gymnastics in order to get a DNA kit for a German person. I know of a number of people here in the US who have put DNA kits in their suitcase and taken them over to Germany and given them to relatives, and then taken them back to the US with them when they come back. So that would be a way that people have gotten around that. But so there are not maybe a lot of people currently in Germany who are testing. So you'd be left with trying to find people that have immigrated already to the US who are descendants of these Germans. I don't know, does that help? Allison, do you have anything to say?
No, that makes sense. I actually went into MyHeritage when you started discussing it. Let me do a share screen again. I'm just going to be your guinea pig, so just tell me what you want to look at. You can actually search by a location. So not only just a name or ancestral surname, you can put in like German, and you start getting results of people from Germany.
Oh, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for specific people in those areas, you just have to search for that location. And in MyHeritage, those pop right up, which is kind of fun. I haven't really thought to search by location before. So I think that's a really fun tip. And I think I might have to play with this now. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think I did that when I was looking for my Eastern European matches at MyHeritage, now that you mention it. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so Deborah is asking a similar question, except she's saying Scandinavian countries. Where would they be most likely to test? I've heard that Family Tree DNA has a lot of Scandinavians, and Family Tree DNA is also one that you can upload to. So you might try that. Other than that, I don't think I know much about that because I'm not Scandinavian myself, so I haven't really been paying attention. Sorry. Okay, Crystal says, oh, were you going to say something, Allison?
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm trying to pull up the Family Tree DNA just to kind of see. And they're being very slow about it. Oh, that's why. Okay. I don't know why, but their website's being very slow. So let's move on to the next question, and we can come back to this.
You can show us Family Tree DNA in a minute. Okay. Crystal says, any new tools or research coming soon to benefit genealogists? I'm not certain that I am in the know about upcoming tools that might be coming out. If you read different blogs, and like Roberta Estes does a blog called DNA Explained, she will announce things like that. She'll announce everything you need to know, basically. Certain Facebook groups, DNA, oh gosh, what's it called? DNA genetics. Hold on a second. Let me figure out what it's called here. All right. Well, I can't find it at the moment, but there are a couple of DNA Facebook groups that you want to join if you are on Facebook, and you will get all the latest news there as well. Blaine Bettinger has a Facebook group that he started, and that's the one I'm trying to think of the name of, but I don't have my Facebook open. So
I can open mine. Hold on.
yeah, Allison will tell us.
I'm just here to support. I pulled up
Thank
DNA Explained. It's dna-explained.com.
Okay.
So let me copy. There's that. Let's start with that. And then you said, I'm in a bunch of these too. So
yeah, it's the one that's Blaine's DNA. I think it's called Genetic Genealogy and something.
yeah. There's genetic genealogy tips and techniques.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
That's the main one that I would suggest.
Yes, I am here. Share screen. Okay. So here is the Facebook group, Genetic Genealogy Tips and Tricks. And there's questions and people go through and answer. The DNA Explained, that's what this is. And you can put your email address in and get notifications. And then I was playing in here. I wanted to see if Scandinavian would come up, and it didn't. But Family Tree DNA, I was trying to figure out if it had locations, but it just has the ancestral surnames. So not what I was hoping for.
Okay, well, let's move on here. Catherine asks, she recently received a 23andMe match from England, which 23andMe predicted was a fourth cousin going back to third great grandparents. At 31 Centimorgans, the shared Centimorgan project said it was only 17% likely, 54% likely to be a sixth cousin or farther back. I haven't been able to get my tree back that far to a sixth cousin. 22 of the 31 Centimorgans are X-DNA. So I would actually possibly subtract all that X-DNA, because if a 22 Centimorgan match on the X is very small and kind of insignificant, but you do have, you know, subtracting that out, you do have a 9 Centimorgan match on the autosomal DNA without X. 23andMe, I think, is the only one that's going to include that number in your total Centimorgans and the X in the total Centimorgans. So the other companies are not including that. So it's kind of like, it's apples and oranges when you're looking at that. So it's kind of artificially, your number of Centimorgans with this person is kind of artificially higher at 23andMe because it's counting the X. So it could be very likely that it's sixth cousin or farther back, especially if it's a 9 Centimorgan autosomal match. I wouldn't personally, if it was me, I wouldn't spend much time on that, because it seems like a fairly distant match. And if you're not able to get your tree back that far, I would continue working on your tree and trying to get, you know, your genealogical research back into England. I mean, you could write to this person and ask them, you know, their tree information, but unless they have a tree going back that far also, it'd be kind of difficult to, I think, connect up. You could look at your shared matches and see if you recognize the names of any of the shared matches. I think it's called in common matches at 23andMe. But that might pinpoint for you a side of the family that this matches on. That might be the best you can do.
So 23andMe also has some really cool stuff with the DNA relatives. You can see where the ancestor birthplaces are and kind of get an idea from there with the family names as well. So you can sort them.
Yes.
I don't know if you've played with that.
I have not.
Should I share that?
Yeah, you can share it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this one, you can go in and say, I want the family name Davis. And then it gives all the people who share that surname. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's
So you
fun.
can narrow down your results, ancestral birthplaces as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that is cool. They have some nice features at 23andMe. Okay,
Each one
let's
is so
move.
different.
Yeah, they really are. They have like different interfaces. They really do. Okay, let's move on to Barbara. Barbara says, with a list of Ancestry.com DNA relatives, how can I use the information on the number of shared segments and the lengths of the longest segment to better focus my research? And she's talking about a 1911 adoption. I'm going to be kind of controversial here, and I'm going to say that I don't use that information myself very much at all. If you're dealing with somebody who is Ashkenazi Jewish, for instance, you need to use that information because a lot of the Ashkenazi Jewish people are very distantly related to one another, but they have small segments and a large number of segments. So that indicates that you're not very closely related to that person. The longer your segment length and the fewer number of segments that you have, even though you share a lot of centimorgans, that would indicate that you're more closely related in a more recent time frame. So if you are looking at an Ashkenazi Jewish question, you will want to pay attention to the lengths of the longest segment and the number of shared segments. Otherwise, I don't pay attention to it very much. Now, there could be some other like kind of fringe-ish sort of situations where you might need to do that. I just haven't done that myself. You might want to kind of Google that and see if you can come up with some DNA experts that talk about it. I bet Roberta Estes talks about it, quite frankly, on her blog. It's not something that I use all the time. And I'm not sure that dealing with a 1911 adoption, whether that information is really going to help you. It kind of depends on your situation and everything, but it's probably not going to be that much help to you. You're probably just going to want to look at the centimorgans and the shared matching. Okay. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Rita, okay. My great-grandfather's father is unknown. His mother is known, as is her parents. My great-grandfather was born in 1896. There are no known male descendants or his siblings. Any steps I can take to determine his father's identity? I have taken Ancestry DNA. Okay. At Ancestry DNA, Rita, you can color code your matches. Now, I don't know if you've already done that or not, using the colored dots. Next to each of your match names, over to the side, there'll be a plus sign. And that if you click on the plus sign, that's where you can add that person to a group. And you want to make a group for your for the other side of the family. So you don't say if this great-grandfather is on your mother's side or your father's side. So let's just postulate that it's on your father's side. So you could make a group for your mother's side, and you can just set all of the matches that you have to your mother aside. Any match to your mother's side of the family. If you look in their trees and you see, you know, a surname from your mom's side of the family, just mark that mom's side of the family and move on. Then for your father's side, you're going to, you know, make groups for the different people. So great-grandfather, you'll have groups for the different families coming off of your father's side. And then you're going to have hopefully some unknown matches that are left over after you color coded all your matches that you know. And those should be from the great-grandfather's line. Now, depending on, I'm assuming then that he was born and there's no birth certificate and that kind of thing. So you'd want to look to see if there's a birth certificate, obviously. It doesn't sound like he was adopted. It sounds like his mother was maybe an unwed mother. I don't know. I'm just kind of reading into your question a little bit. But in that case, then, and she didn't name the father, you could try to look for some kind of paternity case. They filed those back then. If they knew who the guy was and they wanted to go after him for money, I've seen those listed in the newspaper. I've seen also in court records where the family, sometimes the girl's father or her brother, sues the guy that they name as the father. Of course, that's, subject to, is he really the father, the bio father? We don't exactly know, but he's been accused of being the bio father. So you could kind of try to look for those kinds of records, if that would be helpful. But I think this should be solvable by DNA. You could certainly shoot us an email if you want. If you want me to help you kind of sort out your matches a little, if you haven't done that, I can help you.
I am answering a question in here, and I just
Okay.
thought I'd give you a second to, I'm typing in answers too, guys.
Sure.
I just wanted to reiterate, Germany is a baby country. I'm going to send that. German DNA is really hard to pinpoint because of that. So if you have ancestors from what is the current day Germany, it could be any other country where your ancestors' DNA came from because of the way the boundaries work in that country. I'm going to find the video that I love to show. I'm going to find a video. It's on YouTube. Take time to watch it afterwards. And it shows how the boundaries changed in Europe. It's insane to see how that happens. So yeah, you may know that your family's from Germany. You've seen that they came over from Germany, but further back than maybe from a different area of Europe.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so Phyllis asked, what's the best approach to trying to uncover a relationship for an ancestry DNA match that doesn't show a common ancestor and the person hasn't responded to an email? Well, in that case, Phyllis, you can do two different things. You can, you can do more than two things, but you can look at your shared matches. So that's under, you go into the match with this mystery person, and there should be when you're viewing the match, there should be a button that says shared matches. Look at those. And if they're all from your grandmother's side of the family, then you know that this person is somehow related to the grandmother. You don't know exactly how, of course, because they haven't responded to you and they don't have a tree, but at least you can kind of narrow it down a little bit. The other thing you can do is if you have other cousins and such, like maybe on your grandma's side, you can ask them if this person shows up on their matches and how many Centimorgans they share with that person. And that's just kind of a double check kind of thing that, yeah, this cousin on grandma's side does match that same person. And so we're more certain that this is correct, that this is the correct side of the family that they're from. The other thing you can do is Google them if they have an uncommon name. Now, obviously, if their name is John Smith on the DNA testing site, you're not going to be able to figure out which John Smith it is that tested and is your match. But if their name is, I love to use this name, if their last name is McGillicuddy, if it's John McGillicuddy, you might be able to Google John McGillicuddy in your area or in the area where your grandma's family came from and see if you can come up with somebody that might be him. And you can then kind of sleuth about him on the internet, looking for obituaries and different records that you can find on databases like Ancestry or Family Search, and see if this guy, if you can figure out his connection to your grandmother's family. So you're pinpointing what side of the family he's matching on by looking at your shared matches, and then you're kind of sleuthing on the internet. That might be a way to do it. So hope that helps, Phyllis. Allison and I do all sorts of sleuthing on the internet.
It's great fun. People don't realize how much information there is out there.
There is, it really is. Oh gosh. Okay, so Carol says, I've heard about Y-DNA surname projects tracing male lineage and wonder how useful this is. What do you actually find out for genealogy research? Okay, so yes, Carol, this can be very useful. Generally speaking, so you have to find a male in the correct, line to take the test. So let's say, Carol, you want to test your father's male line. You could test your father if he's still living. You could test your brother if he has the same father as you have, or a nephew, a son of your brother, or an uncle. So you need to find somebody on that male line that you're interested in looking at to take the test. I would say take the 37 marker test, which is kind of the beginner testing amount. It kind of gets your toes wet, and see what kind of matches that you get. Of course, the best case scenario is that you get matches that are to the same surname as your father had, for instance, if we're looking at your father's line. And then you're going to contact those matches, look at their trees. Most of them will have posted a tree or some sort of information giving who their paternal line dead ends at. So Family Tree DNA calls it your earliest known paternal ancestor. So they will tell where their paternal line, their genealogy research had stopped. And then you got to get together with those matches and kind of research it together and try to put your family tree all together. So in my particular case, I had my father tested and my maternal uncle tested. So in both cases, I had matches to the correct surnames that I was hoping I would have matches to, my dad's surname and my uncle's surname. And one of the matches was able to trace their family back to the immigrant ancestor. And so basically then the rest of us, even though we don't know exactly our connection genealogically speaking, we know that we're also from that same immigrant ancestor. So the Y chromosome testing helped me with both of my paternal lines to identify the immigrant ancestor. And that was information I did not have before. And so now I can do more genealogical research. I can work together with those matches to try to tie up my particular, father's line with this line of Allens that came out of New Jersey, or my uncle's line to this line of Mitchells that came out of Virginia. So that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you might not get any matches at all. And then you kind of have to wait to see if more people will test. The Y chromosome test isn't the most popular of tests. Most people are doing the autosomal. And so they're not even really advertising the Y chromosome test. Like, you don't see commercials for it on TV or anything like that. So it's just less widely known, but I suggest that people do it. I think it's a really interesting test, and when you get the matches, it's really fulfilling, and it really can break open some of your brick walls on your paternal lines if you can find a male to take the test. Okay, so Anonymous says, what range of centimorgans would you research for Y-DNA? Well, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. I will say this, the Y chromosome doesn't use centimorgans. So centimorgans is what they're using in the autosomal test, which is the one that Ancestry does, MyHeritage, 23andMe. So the Y-DNA is totally different. It's looking at the Y chromosome of a male, and it's basically, if you take a 37 marker test, that's testing 37 different places on the Y chromosome. And then if you match closely with somebody else on the 37 marker test, it means you probably match on all 37 markers, or maybe you have like one or two differences between the two of you. So that's how the Y chromosome differences are measured. It's not centimorgans at all. So if that was your question, hopefully that answers it. Okay, Grace says, my mitochondrial DNA is mainly Scottish, Irish, and English, but I have a small amount of French and Scandinavian that pops up. My grandmothers all have Irish Scots origins, and the farthest one back is County Armagh, 6 generations back. Would the French and Scandinavian be through the fathers of these grandmothers that was passed on to their daughters? For example, one of these great grandmothers was married to a 100% Frenchman. Okay, well, I'm unclear, Grace, about what you're exactly asking. Are you talking about your mitochondrial DNA? Have you taken the mitochondrial DNA test? Or are you talking about your mother's side of the family and talking about the ethnicities that are in your mother's side of the family? So I'm not quite sure about that. I have a feeling that that is what you're talking about, that you're more talking about your ethnicity estimate. Because your mitochondrial DNA is going to give you a haplogroup, and it's going to say that basically like 20,000 years ago, your mother's line, because that's the mitochondrial line, came out of Africa and into Asia and up into Europe. That's kind of what your haplogroup would show for your mitochondrial DNA. So it's not going to give you French and Scandinavian. So I think you must be talking about your ethnicity estimate. And basically, there's not a lot of difference between French and Scandinavian and English in the ethnicity estimate. Allison kind of touched on this before, that Northern European area where a lot of our ancestors came from was very fluid. People moved in, people moved out, there were wars, there were famines, there were conquering kind of things where one group would kind of conquer the next group over here and bring back captives, or, you know, just all kinds of crazy things were happening. If you study the history of Europe, going back 1,000, 1,500 years, a lot of things were going on. A lot of intermixing of the groups, and really kind of we're looking at ancient groups at this time period. We're not looking at, like she was saying earlier about Germany being new, like Germany's a baby. So is France in a way. I mean, you know, I don't know. It's basically the DNA companies right now can't differentiate between those groups very well. And so a lot of us have had, you know, a little bit of Scandinavian or even a lot Scandinavian, and we don't think we have anyone Scandinavian in our tree. So that's been kind of a recurring theme with the ethnicity estimates. Right now, Ancestry is trying to divide out between English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish. And I really think that they're not really very good at that yet either. They're trying, but they keep trying to tell me that I'm 15% Welsh and 50% Scottish, and that's just not true. I'm UK, you know, I'm from the UK. A lot of me is from the UK, but I don't think they've got the percentages quite right. And so it's just kind of for fun. And I wouldn't really, you know, spend a lot of time trying to figure out where the Scandinavian come from, because a lot of us have Scandinavian and it doesn't mean much. Doesn't mean we're really Scandinavian. I think that's kind of a common theme. If you talk to other genealogists, they'll tell you they've got a little Scandinavian too, and they haven't been able to determine where it came from. So we're all kind of thinking that maybe it's Vikings. We don't.
I'm in that boat. I'm actually looking at my ancestry results now, and I'm just like, yeah, that looks, I have no idea where these people came from. Cool. But yeah. I'm very boring German, French, and basically United Kingdom. Like, that's my ancestry. I know that.
Yeah.
So whenever something unusual pops up, I'm always like, hey, Norway, what you doing? Where'd you come from?
Yeah. And basically the thing is, you know, if you had, you know, a significant amount of Norway, and you had also had DNA matches that were Norwegian people, then you might need to be concerned. Like, what's going on with this Norway? Could one of my grandparents or great grandparents have been Norwegian? Because I'm getting this significant amount of Norwegian ethnicity result, and I'm getting Norwegian DNA matches. But see, I don't think you have Norwegian DNA matches, do you, Allison? I don't think you do.
No.
We would have talked about that. Yeah. And
yeah,
I'm Swedish.
Sorry. I got distracted by somebody's question. I was like,
no, that's okay.
That's interesting. I want to read more.
Yeah.
You guys are very interesting.
So anyways, yeah. So as long as, you know, you don't have a lot of close DNA matches that are in Norway right now, for instance, then it's not really indicating that you're recently Norwegian at all. Okay, so let's see what Timothy's got going on here. Timothy says, RT is an adoptee from Russia from about 20 years ago. To find relations, what is the DNA strain to start with? And then what would be the second? Okay, so unfortunately, a lot of adoptees from other countries have a difficult time getting good DNA matches. in these American testing companies, because not too many people from Russia are taking DNA tests. So with that in mind, you know, I certainly suggest you take the test. Probably the best thing to do is take the Ancestry test first and then take the 23andMe test second. The other two testing companies you can upload to. You can upload your DNA raw data file from Ancestry or 23andMe, or from any of the companies. You can upload into Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage. And there's a small fee to unlock the all the features, but it's a small fee. I think at Family Tree DNA it's $19, and at MyHeritage it's maybe $29. And so that's less than what you would pay to order a new test. And then do everything in your power to try to contact the adoption agency that helped broker that adoption and get them to send you the file if you can. That might be one of your best options. I've helped somebody that was an adoptee from Romania, and her highest matches were fourth cousins. And so it was very difficult. I don't know that she has solved it. So hopefully that gives you some advice there, Timothy. Okay, Corrine. I recently put a second great grandfather into my tree after family story and research about the man and my second great grandmother. Realized it's given me 23 DNA matches to him, I assume. Researching the father of this man, I discovered that his half sibling's mother is my second cousin. Oh boy. How much does this affect the accuracy of the DNA I share with the half sibling's descendants? Okay, Corrine, this is complicated and it's making my head spin. Just trying to think of what could be going on. So I think that this is a case where I would ask you to email that to me, and I can kind of ponder it out a little more and think about it and get back with you. So if you can do that, that would be helpful. Okay, anonymous. I'm one of the Williner genealogists. Okay. Our patrons often ask which DNA test is the best. What do you recommend? Okay.
I have something up for that one.
Okay. Go.
Okay. But the answer is we don't have a recommendation. It's what are you looking for? There was somebody else who asked it later in the Q&A, but everybody is looking for something very different when they're getting a DNA test, whether it's to connect with family, curiosity, ethnicity estimate, whether or not you're looking for adoption, you're looking, you want to know more about a specific line. I don't know what your reason is, but we all take this journey for a personal reason. And the different tests are for different purposes. So you need to figure out which one is best for you. And we recommend looking. So this is one of the comparison charts. You can Google and find lots of them, but just kind of look and see what each one does. What is the thing that you are specifically looking for? Some of this is going to get real in the weeds. You aren't probably going to care maybe about the chromosome browsers and stuff like that right off the bat. But is it something that looks at just, I don't know, a specific area of the world? Is it something that is better at doing those ethnicity breakdowns? You kind of have to put the ball back in their court, and we put the ball back in your court as well, because we can't really recommend one over the other unless we know the purpose. Sarah, did you have something to add with that?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, so you might want to just, it sounds like you're a librarian and you're having customers coming in and asking you. So kind of do your reference interview with them and find out more about what they're looking for. And then maybe that will help you kind of advise them a little better.
All right, I put that in the chat.
Cool. Okay, here's a good one. So there's a pretty high probability that I have 3 more half siblings, and they haven't taken a DNA test yet. Birth father's deceased, their birth mother's deceased. Any thoughts on how to approach them? Okay, well, so basically, I'm assuming that you're basing this on some other knowledge that you have that they might be your half siblings. And you didn't tell us what it was, but you want to be fairly certain of your facts before you go and kind of upend their life, unless, it kind of all depends on, the circumstances of how they're your half siblings. Were they from an affair? Were you from an affair? Were they just from a different marriage of your father or mother? Was there an adoption going on? Like, what was the backstory to all of this? And you don't need to tell us what that is, but you need to think about areas where they're going to be sensitive. Now, that being said, you could try to friend them on social media if you find them there. But the DNA Detectives Facebook group, which I'm a member of, recommends that you send a letter in the mail. You don't need to send it certified or anything like that. And you need to be kind of short and succinct. Introduce yourself, tell them why you believe that you're half siblings, and give them your proofs, basically, or your information that you have. Maybe enclose a picture of yourself and give them your name and contact information, and tell them that you don't really want anything from them. You just would like to confirm the connection, or whatever it is that you're hoping to do. Confirm the connection, find out medical information from them, get a family picture from them about their father, if you didn't know that man and he is your father, that type of thing. And then send those out to all 3 of them, sounds like, at the same time, and hope and pray that one of them will get back with you and will be agreeable. There are other people that would suggest you call them on the phone, but that's kind of like ambushing them a little bit. You could Facebook message them. There are people, if they're younger people, they might be more into that. It just depends on also kind of the age group of the people that we're talking about. So it's tricky and it might not work out. And you have to keep that in mind, that they might might just shut you down. So kind of prepare for that, for a different event, different things to happen, bad, good, indifferent. Not everybody is excited to meet a new family member, unfortunately. If brother and sister married, sister and brothers, would this give more links? I think what you're saying is, would they share more Centimorgans? And yes, they would. So this would be like a double cousin. Well, their children would be double cousins to one another. So, if 2 brothers married 2 sisters, then the offspring of those 2 couples would be double first cousins to each other. And they would share about twice as much DNA as a regular first cousin would share. So yes, it's going to kind of mess around with your Centimorgan totals, and you got to be aware that that's happening in your family, so that you know that you can kind of make allowances for it when you're looking at the amount of Centimorgans you share with matches that could be from that marriage, or brother-sister marriage, or brothers and sisters marrying each other. Okay, my father submitted his DNA, this is from Debbie, to Ancestry a few years before he died. Thereafter, I have checked Ancestry and they have purged all their DNA test results from their old process, which they no longer serve as. Would only give me an encrypted CSV file. Suggested I upload it. How safe are the DNA websites, and how hard is it to enter and upload DNA test results? Okay, I'm getting the impression that you might be talking about the Y chromosome test that Ancestry did offer in the past. I'm not sure that that's what you're talking about. They shouldn't have gotten rid of your dad's autosomal test, because there are tons of people in the Ancestry database who took the test and are now deceased. and their DNA is still hanging out in there. They don't take it down when you die. They wouldn't even know that you did pass away. So I'm kind of thinking that you might be referring to the Y chromosome test. You can upload that to, I think it's Mitosearch, which is like a third-party site that you can upload into. If you are talking somehow about his autosomal results, it's not hard to do the autosomal upload either. But I guess if you run into trouble, you might want to shoot us an email and we can kind of troubleshoot what's exactly going on, because I'm not quite sure I'm understanding your situation, so I'm kind of just guessing. Okay, then we have Marlene. The maternal haplogroup is T1A, 1B, and 23andMe says this is very rare. So far, out of 1,500 DNA matches, I have only one person who matches this haplogroup. My dad was born in Scotland, and your mother had some relatives in Scotland. You know, I don't know the answer to that question, Marlene. I would say that, however, in general, this is the general advice that I give about the haplogroups, is that I wouldn't be searching by haplogroups per se in your DNA results. I would much more, I would contact the people that you're close matches with and, just try to see if you can figure out by your trees how you're related. Now, you don't say that you're adopted, so I don't think you are. Sometimes adopted people will find the haplogroup information to be helpful in trying to pinpoint whether a match is on their unknown father's side or their unknown mother's side. But in general, I wouldn't be spending a lot of time trying to match up your haplogroups with people. And if you're really curious about your mother's side of the family, you could always do the mitochondrial DNA test of family tree DNA, and that will actually match you up with people potentially who are on the same maternal line as you have. And then you could contact with them and try to match up how you're related. So this is like the mitochondrial line is your mother's 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 mother. So no men are involved. So I was a little confused why you were talking about your dad there. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question correctly, and you can certainly send us an email if you want to tell me your question in more detail. But that's what I got for you right now. Okay, I'm going to keep going, Allison, until you tell me to stop.
Keep going. You
Okay.
keep flying.
All right.
Go as fast as you can. We'll get it through as many as we can.
I think we can get through them all. I have two DNA matches that clearly not on my maternal line. One is 1812, the other is 1411. When I look at the 5 possible relationships, should I focus on the half relationship section of the shared Centimorgans? So I'm assuming you're saying that they're 1812 Centimorgans and 1411. Well, I don't know enough about whether you know who your father is or not. So you're saying that they're not on your mother's side, and you're not saying whether you know your father or not. So I'm assuming these are people that are unknown to you and you don't know why you're matching with them. You don't recognize their name, etc. And I don't know whether you know who your father is or not. So we can't say that for sure. Based on their date of birth, if you can find out their date of birth, if they're similar in age to you, they're more likely to be a half sibling. However, there's lots of people who have aunts and uncles or nieces or nephews who are near the same age as they are, with families that are just kind of spread out in age, where your grandma was having kids over a 20-year period. That happens more than we think. So I can't really say for sure without knowing more about your situation, but you should be able to look at the shared matches. And if you do know anything about your dad's side of the family, you can maybe figure out which side of the family they're matching, your grandmother's side, your grandfather's side. But then again, if your father is unknown, then the best thing to do is build a tree for those people. If they have a tree, 1812 and 1411 Centimorgan matches, they have a tree, start working on their tree, that kind of thing. Okay, Emma says, thank you. I was wondering if the Centimorgan count at 23andMe was in relation to Ancestry and the timber method. I recently tested 23andMe and tried to figure it out. Yes. So 23andMe is going to have the X chromosome added into your Centimorgan amount. So if you, for instance, found a match that had tested at both places, they might match you at a higher level at 23andMe than they do at Ancestry. And that's because 23andMe is adding in the X chromosome. So you could subtract the X chromosome out, and then the two numbers should be more in line. Ancestry and the timber method, Ancestry is taking out small segments. I don't remember the exact details, but yes, sometimes some of your matches at Ancestry will look lower than they really are because Ancestry is trying to filter out small segments that they think are not possibly real segments. So yeah, if you test at both places and you see matches that have also tested at both places, the Centimorgans are not always going to line up exactly. But most of the time it doesn't matter because it doesn't put them into a different category of match. Like, they're still going to be in the second cousin range at both companies, if that makes sense. Okay. Regina says, when you mention immigrant ancestor for the Y-DNA test, would that male be a grandfather or some other relation? Okay, when I was talking about immigrant ancestor, I am saying that, like I was talking about my father's Y chromosome line, my father's an Allen, as I am an Allen, and his Allen line goes back, as far as I know, to a guy that was born in the 1700s in New Jersey. Now, my dad's Y chromosome matches that he has, so he took the Y chromosome DNA test, and those matches were also to men named Allen, and their earliest known ancestor was in New Jersey in the 1600s. And he was the immigrant. He came over here from England, we think, possibly from the Netherlands, but probably England. And so what we have come up with is that my father is somehow descended from that immigrant ancestor, Allen. We don't exactly know how. We haven't been able to connect all the dots. So that's what I meant by immigrant ancestor.
I think we only have time for maybe one more.
Oh, no.
I know, but we're already over time, so.
Yeah. Let me go quickly. Evan says, do you know why Ancestry took down the 6 and 7 Centimorgan matches? They did that because they had done research that showed that those matches that you only share 6 or 7 Centimorgans with are very often false matches, meaning that you, it was just kind of a coincidence that you shared DNA with that person. Now, of course, not every 6 and 7 Centimorgan matches like that, but a good portion of them were. And so they decided that they were leading people astray a little bit with showing those matches. And so they got rid of them. It was controversial. Many people didn't like it. Okay. All right. So Diane, I think you need to send us an email about this. Diane Melody. She's got a complicated question about through line. So send us an email and we can try to answer that one. Terry says, do you have any suggestions for searching a bio dad with a lot of matches on the paternal side? I have either still living or deceased. Send us an email, Terry, and I'll try to help you. I have okay, Anonymous says, in Ancestry, I have a half cousin who I know matched to me, but she is not matched to my mother, who is her dad's half sister. My mother was never tested. How can this be? Anonymous, send us an email about that too. Because that sounds more complicated than what we can do in a few seconds.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Did I do it?
Okay, Sarah, I have to say, that was amazing. You just flew through so many questions. Thank you, Sarah, for doing that. And thank you all for joining us. If we told you, well, Sarah told you to send us an email, please do. We would love to follow up with you. Also, if you guys come up with another question that you might have, we do want to help you. Our goal is to help you be successful. So thank you for joining us. And thank you again, Sarah, for a wonderful round of answers to the questions from the masses. And we hope that you join us on Tuesday for our presentation on the new and improved Percy. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.